The Paper Crane. Chapter 1. Shadows Behind the Fence. Marie Delacroix had once lived a quiet life in a small town in southern France. She taught history and literature at a local school. Her students loved her calm voice and the way she made difficult topics easy to understand. She believed in kindness, in truth, and in the power of education. But when the war came, everything changed. Her school was closed, her town was occupied, and her friends disappeared one by one. Marie did not stay silent. She helped the resistance by hiding messages and food. She knew the risks, but she could not ignore what was happening around her. In the spring of 1943, Marie was arrested. She was taken from her home without warning and sent to a prison camp in northern France. The camp was surrounded by tall fences and guarded by soldiers. The buildings were cold and crowded. The prisoners were tired, hungry, and afraid. Many had lost family members. Some had stopped speaking. Others stared at the ground all day. Marie felt the weight of fear in every corner. Even in this dark place, Marie tried to stay strong. She helped older women carry water. She shared her small piece of bread with those who had none. She spoke softly to children and told them stories from her classroom. She believed that even a few kind words could make a difference. She watched the sky through the wire fence and reminded herself that the world outside still existed. One day, while walking near the edge of the camp, Marie saw a boy sitting alone. He was small, with thin arms and messy hair. His name was Emile. He was only 12 years old. He had been separated from his parents and brought to the camp months earlier. He didn't speak much, but he was always folding something in his hands. Marie sat near him and watched quietly. Emile was folding a paper crane. He used a torn piece of newspaper and moved his fingers with care. When he finished, he placed the crane on the ground and looked at it for a moment. Then he stood up and gave it to an older prisoner nearby. The woman smiled and held the crane close to her chest. Marie saw this happen again and again. Emile folded cranes and gave them away. He never asked for anything in return. The paper cranes became a quiet symbol in the camp. People began to look for them. Some kept them in their pockets. Others placed them near their beds. The cranes were small and fragile, but they carried meaning. They reminded the prisoners of peace, of freedom, and of the world beyond the fence. Marie understood that Emile was doing something important. He was giving hope in a place where hope was hard to find. Marie started collecting scraps of paper too. She folded her own cranes and gave them to others. She didn't know origami well, but she learned by watching Emile. They never spoke, but they worked side by side. The cranes moved quietly through the camp, passed from hand to hand. They were not loud or powerful, but they were noticed. The guards didn't pay attention to the cranes. They saw them as harmless toys. But for the prisoners, they were more than that. They were messages without words. They were signs that someone still cared. Marie believed that even in silence, people could speak. Even in fear, they could share strength. The camp remained a place of suffering. The days were long, and the nights were cold. But the paper cranes continued to appear. Marie watched Emile grow more confident. She saw others begin to smile again. She knew the cranes could not change the war, but they could change a moment. And sometimes, a moment was enough. Marie kept one crane for herself. She placed it under her blanket each night. It reminded her of her students, of her town, and of the life she had before. It reminded her that she was still herself, even behind the fence. And that was something no one could take away. Chapter 2. A Secret Language. The days in the camp were long and quiet. The prisoners moved slowly, their faces tired and pale. Marie Delacroix tried to stay busy. She helped clean the sleeping areas, shared food when she could, and spoke softly to those who had lost hope. She watched Emile from a distance. He continued folding paper cranes, using whatever scraps he could find, old newspapers, torn packaging, even pieces of labels. He gave the cranes away without saying much. People smiled when they received one. It was a small gift, but it meant something. One morning, Marie found a crane near her bed. It was folded from a thin page of a book. She picked it up gently and noticed something strange. The paper felt thicker in one part. She unfolded the crane carefully and found a tiny note hidden inside. It was no bigger than her thumb. The writing was small and neat. At first, she didn't understand it. But then she saw the pattern. It was a code, a message from the resistance. Marie had seen codes before. Before her arrest, she had helped send messages between groups in her town. She remembered the symbols, the numbers, and the way they hid meaning in simple words. The note inside the crane was a warning. It spoke of a planned search in the camp and told prisoners to hide anything important. Marie's heart beat faster. She realized the cranes were not just symbols of hope. They were tools. They were a secret language. She looked around and saw Emile folding another crane. He worked quietly, his fingers moving with care. Marie understood now that he was part of something bigger. Someone had taught him how to hide messages. Someone had trusted him. She didn't know who, but she knew the risk was great. If the guards found out, Emile could be punished. But he kept folding, kept passing cranes, and kept believing in their power. Marie decided to help. She searched for old book pages, pieces of paper from packaging, and anything else she could use. She practiced folding cranes at night, using the light from a small crack in the wall. Her first few cranes were messy, but she improved. She remembered how Emile folded the wings and shaped the head. She followed his example. Soon, Marie began writing her own messages. She used simple codes, ones she had learned before the war. She warned others about guard movements, shared news from outside, and gave instructions for hiding supplies. She folded the notes into cranes and passed them quietly. She gave them to women in the laundry area, to men near the kitchen, and to children who moved between blocks. The cranes flew from hand to hand, silent and unnoticed. The guards saw the cranes but didn't care. They thought they were harmless. Some even laughed at them. But inside the folds, real information moved. Marie felt a new sense of purpose. She was no longer just surviving. She was helping. She was fighting in her own way. Emile noticed her work. He didn't speak, but he nodded once when she gave him a crane. It was a sign of trust. They became quiet partners. Marie respected his courage. He was only 12, but he understood danger. He didn't ask for praise. He just kept folding. Marie also began teaching others how to fold cranes. She showed them how to hide notes, how to use simple codes, and how to pass messages without speaking. She chose people she trusted, those who had helped others, those who stayed strong. The crane system grew slowly. It was never loud, never obvious. But it worked. The camp remained a place of fear. The guards watched everything. The prisoners stayed quiet. But the cranes moved. They carried words, warnings, and hope. Marie believed that even in silence, people could resist. Even in darkness, they could send light. She kept one crane for herself, hidden under her blanket. Inside it, she placed a message she had written weeks ago. It was not a warning or a plan. It was a sentence from a book she used to teach. It said, "Even the smallest voice can be heard." She read it each night before sleep. It reminded her why she kept folding. The paper cranes became more than a secret. They became a lifeline. And Marie knew that as long as they flew, the prisoners were not alone. Chapter 3. Wings of Risk. Friedrich Lang walked the camp each day with slow steps and quiet eyes. He wore the uniform of a German officer, but he no longer felt proud of it. His face was lined with age and sorrow. He had lost his wife and daughter in the early days of the war, and since then, something inside him had changed. He followed orders, but his heart no longer believed in them. He watched the prisoners with a kind of silent guilt, knowing that many of them had done nothing wrong. He noticed Marie Delacroix and the boy Emile often. They sat together near the fence or worked quietly in the corners of the camp. They folded small paper cranes from scraps of newspaper and old packaging. Friedrich saw the cranes passed from hand to hand. He saw the smiles they brought. He didn't understand at first, but he didn't stop them. The cranes seemed harmless, and he preferred peace over punishment. One afternoon, Friedrich found a crane lying near the edge of the barracks. It was folded neatly, and the paper looked like a page from a book. He picked it up and turned it in his hands. Something felt strange. The paper was thicker in one spot. He unfolded the crane carefully and found a small note hidden inside. The writing was tiny and coded. Friedrich had seen codes before. He had worked with military messages. He recognized the style. The note was not dangerous in a violent way. It was a warning, a message meant to protect someone. Friedrich stood still for a long time. He could report it. He could follow the rules. But something stopped him. He thought of his daughter, who used to fold paper animals at the kitchen table. He thought of the prisoners, who had so little and still tried to share hope. He folded the note back into the crane and placed it in his coat pocket. From that moment, Friedrich made a quiet decision. He would help, but in secret. He began collecting scraps of paper and leaving them near Marie's work area. He made sure the guards didn't notice. He watched the prisoners who received the cranes and made sure they were not punished. He didn't speak to Marie or Emile, but he protected them in small ways. Friedrich knew the risk. If someone discovered his actions, he could be arrested or worse. But he felt it was right. He had followed orders for too long. Now he wanted to follow his conscience. He believed that helping even one person was better than staying silent. He started to notice more cranes around the camp. They appeared in shoes, under blankets, and near food trays. Friedrich saw how they moved quietly, like birds in flight. They carried messages, warnings, and sometimes simple words of comfort. He respected the courage it took to send them. He admired the care with which they were folded. One night, Friedrich saw Emil sitting alone, holding a crane with slow hands. The boy looked tired but focused. Friedrich left a small stack of clean paper near him and walked away. He didn't need thanks. He didn't need recognition. He just wanted the cranes to keep flying. The camp remained a place of fear, but the cranes brought something different. They brought connection. They brought strength. Friedrich watched Marie teach others how to fold them. He saw prisoners begin to trust again. He felt something inside himself begin to heal. He kept one crane in his own pocket. It had no message inside. It was just a reminder. A reminder that even in war, people could choose kindness. Even in silence, they could speak. Even in danger, they could protect. Friedrich Lang was still an officer, but he was no longer just a guard. He had become part of something quiet and brave. He had joined the wings of risk. And he knew that sometimes, the smallest actions could carry the greatest meaning. Chapter 4. Betrayal. The paper crane system had grown quietly inside the camp. It had become a lifeline for many prisoners. Messages moved from hand to hand, folded inside small birds made of old paper. Marie Delacroix and Emile worked carefully, never drawing attention. Friedrich Lang watched from a distance, helping in secret. For a while, it felt like hope was stronger than fear. But fear had its own voice. One prisoner, a man named Luke, had arrived at the camp only weeks earlier. He was thin, sick, and desperate. He had lost everything: his home, his family, and his strength. Hunger made him weak, and fear made him dangerous. He saw the cranes being passed around. He didn't understand their meaning, but he saw how people reacted. He saw how Marie and Emile were treated with quiet respect. He wanted safety. He wanted food. He wanted to survive. One cold morning, Luke spoke to a guard. He told him about the cranes. He said they were being used to hide messages. He didn't know the full truth, but he gave enough detail to raise alarm. The guard listened, then reported it to the officers. The camp changed quickly. Searches began that afternoon. Guards moved through the barracks, checking blankets, shoes, and pockets. They tore apart sleeping areas and questioned prisoners. Marie was arrested first. Her hands were shaking, but her face stayed calm. She was taken to a small room and questioned for hours. They asked about the cranes, about the messages, and about who helped her. She said nothing. Emile was taken next. He was separated from the others and moved to a different block. He didn't cry, but his eyes were full of fear. Marie didn't know where he was. She felt helpless. The silence in the camp grew heavier. People stopped folding cranes. They stopped passing paper. The system was broken. Friedrich Lang watched everything. He saw Marie being led away. He saw Emile disappear. He knew the risk had become real. His position as an officer gave him access, but it also made him a target. If anyone discovered his role, he would be punished. Still, he couldn't stay silent. That night, Friedrich found Marie in the holding area, He waited until the guards changed shifts. Then he slipped into the room and gave her a small piece of paper. It was clean, folded once, and hidden inside a piece of cloth. Marie looked at him and understood. It was the last chance. She unfolded the paper and saw a set of coordinates. It was a location outside the camp, a hidden exit used long ago by workers. Only a few people knew about it. The resistance had marked it as a possible escape route. Marie had to send this message. It could help others. It could bring rescue. She folded the paper into a crane with slow, careful hands. It was the most important crane she had ever made. She didn't decorate it. She didn't write anything else. She just folded it tight and placed it inside a small box used for soap. Friedrich took the box and promised to pass it on. He gave the box to a young guard he trusted. The guard had once helped a prisoner find medicine. He was quiet, loyal, and tired of violence. Friedrich told him the box was important. He didn't explain why. The guard nodded and carried it out of the camp. Marie waited in silence. She didn't know if the crane would reach the resistance. She didn't know if Emil was safe. She didn't know if Friedrich would be caught. But she knew she had done what she could. She had folded hope into wings and sent it into the world. The camp was quiet the next morning. The searches stopped. The guards returned to their usual routines. But something had changed. The prisoners were afraid. The cranes were gone. The silence was deep. Marie sat alone in her cell. She thought about her students, about her town, and about the stories she used to tell. She thought about Emil and his small hands folding paper. She thought about Friedrich and his quiet courage. She didn't cry. She waited. The paper crane had flown into danger. But it carried more than a message. It carried trust. It carried resistance. And it carried the hope that even in betrayal, someone would still choose to protect. Chapter 5. The Final Flight. The camp was quiet in the days after the searches. The prisoners moved slowly, afraid to speak or look up. The paper cranes had stopped. Marie Delacroix sat alone in her cell, thinking about Emil and wondering if the crane with the coordinates had reached the resistance. She had folded it with care, pressing each crease with steady fingers. It was not just a message. It was a chance. A fragile hope hidden inside paper wings. Friedrich Lang had done his part. He had passed the crane to a young guard named Otto, a man who had once helped a sick prisoner without asking questions. Otto was quiet and careful. He took the crane and left the camp during his shift. He didn't ask what was inside. He didn't need to know. He only knew it mattered. The crane reached the right hands. Marie didn't know what would happen next. She waited in silence, watching the sky through the small window in her cell. The days were cold. The guards returned to their routines, but something felt different. There was tension in the air, like the wind before a storm. The prisoners sensed it too. They whispered less, but their eyes held something new, expectation. Then, one morning, everything changed. The sound of gunfire broke the silence. Shouts echoed across the camp. The gates were forced open. Smoke rose from the far side of the fence. The resistance had come. They moved quickly, breaking locks and leading prisoners out. Marie heard footsteps and voices. She stood up, heart racing. Her cell door was opened by a man in a worn coat. He told her to run. Marie didn't hesitate. She followed the others through the broken gates. She saw Emile near the kitchen block, his face dirty but alive. He ran to her, and they held hands as they escaped together. The camp was in chaos. Guards fled or surrendered. The prisoners moved like a wave, some crying, some silent. Marie looked back once and saw the place that had held her for so long. It was falling apart. Friedrich Lang was nowhere to be seen. Marie searched for him in the crowd, but he was not among the prisoners. She asked a few people, but no one had seen him. Some said he had disappeared before the attack. Others believed he had helped from inside and then vanished. Marie didn't know the truth, but she felt it in her heart. He had done all he could. He had made the final choice. Days later, after the prisoners were taken to safety, Marie found something. It was a metal flask, old and scratched, lying near the edge of the forest where the resistance had gathered. She picked it up and saw a small carving on the side. It was a paper crane, etched into the metal with care. She held it close and closed her eyes. She knew it was his. Friedrich had never asked for thanks. He had never spoken about his pain. But he had chosen to help. He had passed the crane. He had protected the message. And in the end, he had disappeared like the cranes themselves, quiet, brave, and full of meaning. Marie and Emile stayed together after the escape. They were taken to a safe town, where they rested and recovered. Marie began writing again, recording everything she remembered. She wrote about the cranes, about the messages, and about the people who had risked everything for a small piece of folded paper. She kept Friedrich's flask on her desk. It reminded her that courage does not always shout. Sometimes, it folds itself into silence and flies when no one is watching. The final flight of the paper crane had brought freedom. Not just for Marie and Emile, but for many others. It had carried more than coordinates. It had carried trust, sacrifice, and the quiet strength of a man who chose to do what was right. And that, Marie believed, was the true meaning of hope. Chapter 6. Memory in the Folds. After the war ended, Marie Delacroix returned to her hometown in southern France. The streets were quiet, and many buildings were damaged, but the school still stood. It was dusty and cold, but familiar. Marie walked through the empty classrooms and remembered the voices of children, the sound of chalk on the board, and the smell of old books. She had survived the camp, but she had lost part of herself there. Still, she knew she had something to give. She began teaching again. Her students were younger than before, many of them born during the war. They didn't understand what had happened, but they saw the sadness in the eyes of adults. Marie didn't tell them everything. She didn't speak about pain or fear. Instead, she told them stories. She spoke about courage, about kindness, and about small things that made a big difference. One day, she brought a paper crane to class. It was folded from a page of an old book. She placed it on her desk and told the children that this little bird had once carried a message. A message that helped people escape danger. The children listened quietly. Marie explained that even something as simple as folded paper could carry hope. She didn't name the camp or the people involved. She just said that during dark times, someone had dared to believe in light. Marie kept teaching for many years. She became known not just as a teacher, but as a storyteller. Her lessons were gentle but strong. She taught her students to look for meaning in small things. She encouraged them to be brave in quiet ways. She believed that kindness didn't need to be loud to be powerful. Emile grew up far from the camp. He was taken in by a family who cared for him and helped him heal. He didn't speak much about the past, but he never stopped folding cranes. As he got older, he began to draw and paint. His art was soft and thoughtful. He used light colors and simple shapes. But in every piece, there was a crane, sometimes hidden, sometimes clear. He created a series of paintings called Wings of Silence. Each one showed a moment from the war, but not with violence. Instead, they showed hands passing paper, eyes watching the sky, and children holding folded birds. One painting showed a flask with a crane carved into the metal. Another showed a woman folding paper in a dark room. Emile didn't explain the images. He let people feel them. One of his paintings was placed in a memorial museum. It hung near the entrance, where visitors could see it first. It showed a single paper crane flying over a fence. The sky was gray, but the crane was white. People stopped and stared. Some cried. Some asked how paper could carry so much meaning. The museum guide said it was based on a true story, but the artist wanted the message to speak for itself. Marie visited the museum once. She stood in front of the painting and remembered everything. She remembered the cold nights, the quiet folding, and the moment the crane flew into danger. She touched the glass and whispered a thank you, not just to Emile, but to Friedrich, to the guard who helped, and to every person who had chosen kindness over fear. She returned home and folded another crane. She placed it on her windowsill, where the sun could reach it. It was not a message. It was a memory. A reminder that even in silence, something beautiful could grow. The paper crane had become more than a symbol. It had become a lesson. A lesson that strength is not always loud. That courage can live in small acts. That hope can be passed from hand to hand, folded into something simple, and sent into the world. Marie kept teaching until she was old. Her students grew up and remembered her stories. Some became teachers. Some became artists. Some simply carried the memory of a woman who believed in paper birds. And somewhere in a quiet town, a crane still sat on a windowsill, waiting for the wind. Thank you for your attention. If you like the story, please like and subscribe. It motivates us to make new videos and helps us promote the channel. Thank you.